Today you've got me, Dan Visser, Sales and Marketing Director for the Langdale Estate and on the board of Cumbria Tourism, and Jen Cormack, who's the Sales and Marketing Director for Windermere Lake Cruises, Lakeland Museum and the other Langdale Leisure businesses. And we're going to talk to you today about reopening, which we're all getting very revved up about, excited about, and trying to plan for and do with very, very little information at the moment. So hopefully we can share some best practice from our two businesses and then discuss with you any other aspects that Cumbria Tourism might be able to help with. So today we're going to talk about, me and Jen are going to talk about what we've done in our businesses so far in dealing with this crisis and planning for opening. We're going to talk about our respective planned timing for our opening and what that might look like over the coming months. And then what measures we have put in place already. Obviously, these will be subject to significant change as we learn more, but that will be based on what we know at the moment or what we don't know. So to start with, I'll hand over to Jen, who's going to talk about what she's done so far.
Hello, hi. I think the only thing that we're not able to address today is an exact date that you can open. Nobody knows that at the moment, so there is a Q&A button on everyone's screen. If you've anything you want to ask us, just pop it in the Q&A and we'll answer it as we go along. But the only thing we can't tell you is what date you can open, because basically we've no idea. In terms of what we've done as a business, so not only do we operate Windermere Lake Cruises, but we also operate the Lakeland Motor Museum. So two very different businesses. In terms of Windermere Lake Cruises, we've had to assess all of our vessels and look at 2 metre distancing. To do that, we're having to reduce the capacity of the number of people that we can. Oh, someone's saying there's a problem with the sound. I don't know if anybody else is having an issue. What we're having to do is look at the capacity on board, and in some cases we're going to have to reduce that to 20% of our usual carry-ins. We've had to have a look at designs of each boat, look at where people are going to sit. We're going to have to look at how we can sell those tickets, and what we do then is look at how we can sell those tickets and how that differs to what we've done already. So our teams have gone down, they've looked at all the boats, they've marked out what seats can be used and what seats can't be used, and now we know how many people we can put on a boat at any one time. To do that, we're going to have to do timed tickets. We've never done this before, we've always just had a turn up and get on board basically, but we're going to have to manage the queues of people that will be down there. So what's really important for us was our back-end booking system. So we've got a booking system now that a customer will have to book a specific time and a specific departure point, and then to get their tickets on board. That reduces the amount of people that will come and buy tickets at the desk. It's taken a lot of work to do that. We've had to change our usual booking systems. There's been a lot of work in the background, and we've also changed what we do in terms of the cruises. So in the past we had cruises that stopped off at various points. With time ticketing, we're not going to be able to do that. We don't want passengers to get off and then miss the boat that they should be coming back on, because they'll have to be assigned a specific seat at a specific time. So we've changed our cruises, or we will be changing our cruises to do non-landing cruises only. So we've had to, in effect, start from scratch again with our business. In regards to the museum, we've gone in and looked at how we can open that safely. And the easiest way to do that was, again, timed entry, but 2 metre lines throughout the museum. We've looked at all the touch points, we've looked at all the pinch points, we're marking a way through the museum so customers walk one way. We'll only let customers in maybe every 15 minutes, and that way families or groups of people will work their way through the museum and stay 2 metres apart at all times. We think the first area of our business that will open up is our self-drives. That way families can take a boat out on their own. They're not with anybody else. The only people they'll come into contact with is our staff member that is scanning their tickets. Again, this is online sales only. and a customer will come, hire the boat, come back, and then it will be the cleaning of that throughout. Risk assessments coming out of our ears in all aspects of our business, and cleaning is going to be one of the biggest ones. We're going to make sure everything's cleaned, staff are cleaning between each cruise, the boats are cleaned down all the time, door handles, barriers, any touch points are being cleaned constantly. And I think it will give customer reassurance to see our staff cleaning at all times. We've had a lot of conversations around toilets. Do we open the toilet on board? Don't we open the toilet on board? How can we do this safely? We've decided we're going to have to, because we're going to be accepting families on board with small children. So we will have hand sanitizers outside each toilet, additional virucidal hand wash inside the toilet, signs on the back of the toilet door reminding people to wash their hands when they leave, and these will be cleaned at all times. We are just hoping that customers will engage with this. The only time that we feel that a customer will be less than 2 meters apart on board is if they have to visit the toilet, because they'll have to walk past other passengers. And what we're doing with this is making a note of this on our booking terms and conditions. So before a customer purchases a ticket, we tell them that if they do choose to visit the toilet, they will have to pass other customers. And also, if they're sat there, another customer may walk past them at any point to visit the toilet. At this point, giving the customer, it's their choice whether they decide to purchase the ticket or not. We will do everything in our power to ensure social distancing, but we can only give our customers the information that they need.
Brilliant, thanks, Jen. I'll add to that. I won't go over the social distancing again, because that's pretty much covered quite comprehensively the challenges that we're facing around social distancing. All of our businesses will be having that challenge, and it will be different depending on your physical infrastructure. Particularly toilets are one of the most challenging areas. I can imagine where you've got an accommodation provider, which is maybe a B&B with apart from a fire escape, a single entrance that comes into a older building that's gonna provide some specific challenges. On top of that, some of the things I won't go over, like I said, distancing, but some of the things we're doing here at Langdale specific to the accommodation sector. We're looking at those touch points that are specific to our industry. So things like arrival and departure. We're enabling keys for accommodation to be able to be sent to people's mobile devices, so they don't even have to come and check in and check out. We're looking at leaving keys in accommodation, so people can go straight to their accommodation where it's appropriate and where it's safe to do so. We're looking at reducing the length of stay, particularly for week-long stays with self-catering and timeshare units, to give our housekeepers extra time to provide a deeper clean. Also, we're planning potentially for having fewer housekeepers here, because we run a bus service for a lot of our housekeeping team. So we'll either have to run fewer buses, bearing in mind the distancing that Jen's already mentioned for transport providers, or if we can have to stick with the same bus routine that we have now, we'll have to have half as many people on it. So that's presenting a few challenges along the way in terms of getting people here, getting them in and moving them around. But we're doing that. We're having to provide a whole different set of information for people before they arrive. So advising people on the difference that their experience is going to be compared to maybe a previous visit, or what they've experienced before, or what they may be expecting when they come here. So that arrival information is key, as is the information when we actually sell something to somebody, because what they're buying now might not be quite what they used to. It'll be different and will have different values to it. Hopefully people will be expecting to pay a premium for fantastic housekeeping, where they may have paid a premium for a wonderful spa in the past. Where things like spa and leisure are concerned, that's going to be very different for people. They can't just turn up, sign in and go for a swim. That's going to be hugely different. They'll have to come in one entrance, leave at another one. There'll be no signing in or out. There may not be, or there's very unlikely to be changing rooms. There'll be toilet facilities. There'll be no signing in and out. We'll have to do that for them. Everything initially will be bookable. Time slots will have to be booked in advance. They can't just wait till it starts raining and then all pile in like they normally do. So that's going to be a challenge to keep people 2 meters apart. Luckily, we have seen, which we can share later, some kind of guidance on leisure facilities and a safe distance between guests. So we're working to that, but certainly based on what we heard on the news this morning, the 2 meter distancing is likely, the government are going to stick with 2 meters rather than change it down to 1 meter, which they were talking about before. We've obviously got to keep all our staff safe. So we've got a lot of our team members who do admin and sales and marketing will continue to work from home when we reopen. That has been an option to a lot of our staff previously, but it'll be an increased option. And PPE for staff will be different. Obviously, chefs wear PPE all the time anyway, but there'll be additional PPE for chefs. And it may well be the case that those people serving tables, welcoming people to spas and so on, will also have PPE that people are not used to. And it may be the case, and we've just done a survey with a lot of our past guests, that we ask our guests to change the way that they enjoy the facilities. One of the surprising things in our survey today was that a very, very high number of our guests are prepared to have a temperature check before they enter certain facilities on the site. So that was quite encouraging that people's expectations and perceptions have changed as well. And certainly our offering is changing significantly, particularly around food. When we create a menu that can be created with chefs working at 2 meters, the menu looks very, very different to what we've had before. So that's all in the planning and going into place now. Jen, timing?
Yep, just a few questions that have come in I think we can answer as we go along. A question to me, given that we'll be running at only 20%, are we still viable? That's obviously a conversation that the board have had to have. Yes, but what we are having to do is change our product. So our product will be changed, and we will be increasing the price slightly. We've done a lot of consumer research on this, and I think it was 42% of customers are expecting things to be cost to go up. So that's quite promising. So we're not going to hike the price too high, but we are changing our product and therefore changing the price.
I'll pick up on a couple of questions as well there, Jen, before we move on. That's a good point. How will the tourist board manage messages if our customers get the feeling problems with capacity? But capacity is always a challenge. As soon as we have a very high capacity, we've got over tourism. As soon as we've got capacity, then we have challenges what the tourist board doing to fill it. So capacity is always a problem. I would hope, and one of the signals I'm getting back is that people are more responsive about their own distancing and will manage that to a certain extent. Once a place is full, it's full. Obviously, there's a new full for most people who are on a reduced capacity. So I would think that would be self-regulating, one would hope. There's also another question about enforced empty days. All of the agencies and operators I've spoken to are having some form of extended housekeeping, whether that's an earlier departure and a later arrival or an empty day. But at the moment, that's not going to be enforced on anybody as far as I'm aware, but we haven't seen any guidelines around this yet at all. In terms of, there's a question about spas resuming face-to-face work, as in massages, facials and so on. Our plan is not to offer treatments at the moment until we see some guidelines and can plan properly. Clearly, a spa treatment does not provide for 2 meter distancing in the workplace. So if people want to offer that, then that will have to be something that's at their discretion and have to have a very rigorous plan in place to give some confidence both to the staff and to the guests that it's appropriate and safe.
There was just another question there from somebody asking about Windermere Lake Cruises leaflets. Thank you. At the moment, all the leaflets that we have out there will be now useless basically, because we're changing our product. What we are doing and what we're driving all of our customers to do is book online. And what's really, really key for us now is our messaging. As you'll all be aware, the Wearing Ppe can get very busy, and we will be having to manage people's expectations. We'll be having to look at reducing queues, and that's why all of our messaging will be book before you get here, book online. Our booking system will be able to take an online booking up to 10 minutes before the cruise departs. So in effect, if a customer does arrive and we have availability, they can book there and then online. But a lot of what we will be doing is communications. And I think somebody else put a question about what would CT be doing in terms of that. It's all now, in terms of opening, it's all now about our messaging. We can't say we're opening on whatever date because we don't know. We're putting plans in place to work towards the 4th of July, as that's the date that's been muted for hospitality. But as soon as we have a firm date, or as soon as we get further advice, we will then tell our customers when we're opening. We'll tell them how we're opening. We're going to have to, I think it's businesses over 50 employees have to put the risk assessments online. What customers will want now is to know that they're safe, to know that their families are safe, the children are safe. So our messaging will be about what we're doing to keep them safe, and how we're doing that. And we'll ask them to follow the booking guidelines that we are going to set out, how they should get to us, how they should queue when they get here, what they should do when they depart the boat, and how best we can just manage the queues, really.
Jen's absolutely right. Information is key. What would have maybe previously been information overload to our guest customers it is probably going to be the normal going forward. There's a couple more questions. Firstly, about July the 4th. Yes, that's the date that I think we've all been pointed towards as the date that we can expect to open hospitality in some format. But whether that changes and what the detail is, nobody's seen anything like that. People from different households holidaying together. Now, I've dealt with a few inquiries here at Langdale about that. I can't stop people from different households turning up and holidaying in the same unit. We're going to encourage people not to. We're going to encourage all our guests to stick to the rules and stick to the guidelines. But I can't actually stop them from doing so. And it is a challenge. Our guests have a responsibility not only to keep themselves safe, but to keep our staff safe and to keep other guests safe. And by doing that, they are putting that at risk. So we're quite comfortable to point that out to them as well. There's a question from Jim Spooner about how long will your week-long holidays be? They'll be reduced by 1 day. And it's the day of, they'll be leaving a day early, so which is much easier to manage than arriving a day late, because that's really easy to get wrong. And Sally's asked about the Safe Tourism kite mark. We are led to believe that there will be a kite mark, probably distributed via Visit Britain in the first instance, which will be self-assessed. For us to then go and use to prove that we are COVID ready, or whatever the term might be. But I think what is key is reassurance to your guests that you are doing the right thing. And that can come in all sorts of formats, which it could come in just a 10-point plan that shows what you're doing. If you want to go and have a look at another place at Ullswater, they've got a really good 10-point plan on their website already as what they're doing. Best Western hotels already have their own kite mark, which they're putting out. And so there's quite a number of ways of doing it, and we can certainly point people in the direction of some best practice around that.
Someone's just asked Dan about when do we have any information on if there's going to be a staged reopening? And the answer is we just don't have that data yet. We are lobbying hard. I also sit on the board of UK Inbound, and it's something that we're really lobbying government with. I know UK Hospitality are doing it as well. Which parts of hospitality are going to be able to open and when? And we're still no clearer on that.
Yeah. And then just with firing through the questions, it looks like the questions are going to take all afternoon at this rate, which is really good. Are you providing PPE for your housekeeping staff? Yes, absolutely. Not only will they need PPE to keep themselves safe and their guests safe, it looks like the huge cocktail of chemicals they're all going to be using to keep the rooms clean. They're going to be needed to keep safe from all those as well, with the foggers and the steamers and all the additional products they're using. So, but absolutely, we're looking at PPE right across the site for everybody, from check-in, check-out, right through. The only people who won't be provided with it are those working from home. Dominic has asked a really good question about if a guest shows COVID symptoms while staying in your accommodation. Well, the advice before we closed was that that guest should be asked to leave site immediately and go to their home to isolate. Now that I don't expect to change, although we did have a hotel room that was had a separate door to everywhere else, where we could have either staff or guests isolating on site if we had to. The interesting thing now, of course, is with track and trace. If we have a guest on site who has been within 2 meters of a number of other guests or a number of our staff for more than 15 minutes, we could have a whole load of other people that need to go and self-isolate for 14 days as well. And until we really understand the implications, we could have a member of staff, in theory, that shows symptoms, is on the track and trace app, and we could lose a whole department for 14 days overnight. So that's a real challenge that we're sort of getting our heads around, and how would we manage that, and how would we deal with that should it happen?
Caroline's just asked a question: with time ticketing and the inevitable traffic queues, what happens if people don't make their time booking? As a business, what we'd want to do is put them on the next one. But if that boat was full, it would be up to the customer to ensure that they did meet their timed time ticket. What we would hope to do is be very flexible and try and get them on a later one. But that's going to be where we're going to have to, and it comes back to that communication and the comms, we're going to really have to push the message out to our customers how we expect them to arrive and on time.
There's also a really good question from Jason at Windermere Marina, who we already had some correspondence with. Hi, Jason. They're one of the very few businesses that can accept guests at the moment, although not staying overnight. Because of course they've got the marina with the boats on, and the question is to do with well, he's stated that they're seeing good compliance with distancing, which is really encouraging. Let's hope it stays self-regulating like that for all of us. That's really good. But it's about operators' responsibility and liability for enforcing distancing. It's something that we've looked at, and we would really hope that our guests would do that for us, and we would expect and tell our guests before they arrive that they have a responsibility. Our staff will also be very, very well briefed on the requirements, and will step in and point people in the right direction if our guests are putting themselves, are putting our staff at risk or other guests at risk. But there is no guidelines on that at the moment, certainly in terms of liability. And I know liability is a big concern with a lot of people in our industry, that should somebody come and stay, visit, eat, drink, or whatever at your establishment, and can prove that they contracted the virus there, would there be any kind of liability? And I know there are big concerns and no answers at all in hospitality about that at the moment.
I've just got a question here from Claire about risk assessments and being published on your website. The reading that I've done so far is that if you employ more than 50 people, then you have to publish your risk assessments online. I don't know if you've read anything different to that, Dan.
No, that's exactly as I understand it. It's at this time, with the current circumstances, it would be very good practice and probably get you more bookings, and possibly justify a higher rate if you did choose to publish your risk assessments online. It just would be a very, very good thing to do right now, whether it's regulated or not.
And a question here for you, Dan: are you reducing your prices because you're only now offering 6-night stays? No.
Right. The value is in the additional housekeeping, and I'm sure we haven't had any kickback yet. from people who are coming to stay for 6 days rather than 7. So there is some additional value in the work we're doing to make sure that those units have a higher grade of housekeeping, additional housekeeping. We're also publishing a 10-point housekeeping promise, if you will, where we guarantee a certain housekeeping level to high-risk areas within the unit, and that takes longer than the 4 hours we would normally get in a changeover to do that.
And a question here as well, I think it was from Jason. Are we implementing, is anybody going to actually monitor and police the 2 metre distancing on our grounds? It's not something we can do, and again, we don't want to put our staff at risk in any way. What we will be doing is, as we always do on every trip, we do a safety briefing, and within that safety briefing, we will reiterate the 2 metre distancing. But I don't think there's any way that we can police it or enforce any fines or anything at all with that.
And there's a couple of questions here which we've kind of partially covered. Sue's looking at what happens if there's a trackable COVID case within your accommodation, within your guest house particularly. The answer is we just don't know. If people are traceable back to your guest house as a place where they've been within 2 meters of somebody who has developed symptoms, whether you can be shut down or not, we have no idea. I suspect you would be one of the people as an operator who would be traceable, and you would have to go and isolate for 14 days. Whether that makes your business operable or not, I don't know. There's a whole lot of unknowns around that. It may be that only those people who are registered with the app are traceable to that point within 2 meters of the person who developed symptoms, and how many people sign up for the app as well is key to that. And we just don't have any of those answers at all at the moment.
Ivan's asked a question in regards to will guests still be welcome in the Lake District, given the highly hostile attitude that was expressed in the press? I think I know that I have my sales line diverted to me. Over the weekend, I had hundreds of calls of people asking if we were open and wanting to visit. And I know that with CT's recent survey, 3,000 visitors, of 3,000 people, it says that they do believe that Cumbria is still a welcoming place to be. So I think the answer is yes, the majority of our customers are still wanting to visit. There may have been a little negativity in the press, but as CT, we're doing all we can to send out as many positive messages, as many welcoming messages, and we'll continue to do that going forward.
I think so. I think the messaging, on a wider note about CT, the messaging that CT has put out overall has been right, and the timing's been right. These things, with all of these things and everything in business, you're not always going to keep all the people happy all the time. And when it's a membership organisation with 2,500 members, that's always going to be the case. But the message was very, very joined up with the police, the National Park Authority, and the Cumbria Local Enterprise Partnership, and so on. And now that we've got people visiting the Lake District for day trips, it's great to see so many visitors. Some of the messaging has moved away from criticising CT to criticising the visitors that don't park properly and leave litter. And there'll be a minority that do that, and that's really disappointing because it sends out all the wrong messages again. Hopefully we'll be moving towards a message that we're all able to open and everybody's welcoming guests overnight very soon, and that's the stage we're really looking forward to. And that kind of goes into Dennis's question about, do you expect self-catering and campsites to be open on the 4th of July? The 4th of July, as B&Bs are usually smaller. I would expect second homes, self-catering, caravan parks, timeshare, whatever, to be one of the first areas to open if there is a phased opening. Serviced accommodation can come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes and styles, some with plenty of space and some with relatively little space. Our hotel, for example, is spread across a number of buildings, and distancing is relatively easy once we've taken about 25 rooms out of service, which we've done. for other hotels larger than us have confined corridors where it's much more difficult. The rooms are more close together, so that's a challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges for campsites is the communal facilities like washing facilities. I don't know how you can have a campsite with washing facilities where you can distance there. That's going to be a challenge, whereas B&Bs are normally, I would hope, all en suite. So things like hostels and campsites, despite the camping being very distant, it's the bit in the middle that might be a challenge for some of the operators to get right, and I know some of them are struggling with that.
Jane's asked a question, Dan, that maybe you can answer. We run a small B&B. How do we serve breakfasts? Will it have to be pick up, or can we go and serve a cooked breakfast?
I think there's a couple of ways of doing that, and I'll give you the example of what we've done. We've looked at room service, both in terms of a tray of breakfast and also in terms of a takeaway bag, but a very high quality takeaway bag with a fantastic option in it. We've also, before this happened in the last week of operation, we had, as anybody that runs a breakfast service will know, everybody piles in the last half hour of breakfast because they want to leave it as long as possible before they go out for the day. But we made sure that everything was bookable, and we spread breakfast out. Not only spreading it out in terms of getting customers to book and giving them a time slot, but running breakfast right up to lunchtime as well. So we actually give a lot more time between individual breakfast services to be able to look after people. For some people, excuse me, it might be worth looking at a room-only rate where you haven't done it before. And certainly where you've got people departing, a takeaway breakfast to take with them could be a really good idea and an option for you. But certainly in some of the older properties that have B&Bs located in them, getting people moving around the accommodation and through breakfast is going to be a really big challenge.
In terms of an attraction, on board all of our vessels, we have bars, we serve food, we serve alcoholic drinks, soft drinks. We've taken the decision to close all of our shops and bars on board, so we won't be selling any food or drink at all. That's just a decision we've made, not because of any legislation, but we just don't feel that we can do it with 2 metre distancing. So any aspect of our business that we're not able to open with that, following the guidance, we're not doing. So an anonymous person's asked the question, which we all want to ask. The Prime Minister has discussed a possible reopening of some hospitality venues from the 4th of July, which is obviously subject to risk and impact assessments. Does CT expect any advance notice regarding changes, or is it likely to be like recent announcements with just a day or two lead time? Again, we've no idea. We've all had we've all heard the shock announcements, and which is why us as a business are doing everything we can to be ready to reopen. That should Boris come on the TV tonight and say you can open from tomorrow, we're pretty much there and can do. But we, as a DMO, we have no insider knowledge at all. Everything we hear, everybody else hears at the same time.
There's a question about inconsistencies between additional cleaning, disinfecting and so on for self-catering and public toilets or keeping toilets open and so on, and CT's position on enforced vacant days. It's not really CT's position to comment on people's choices. We will interpret the government guidelines and try and help people along the way as best we possibly can. And it really is up to operators to take some of the information that's available and make their own decisions. And CT is very happy to try and help you make the decision rather than make it for you, if that's not passing the buck just a little bit. But it is a real challenge. There will be some operators that will have a very different set of policies, practices to others, and some will be safer than others. That's just a fact of life. To a certain extent, it's up to the customers to choose which ones they want to go and visit. Some will be able to make a decision in advance through the information they've been given out, some won't. Some will be wowed by the fantastic safety that people have put in place, and some may well be disappointed and possibly won't go back. When you've got such a diverse industry as ours, with lots and lots of operators, essentially operating similar businesses, but in very different ways, in very different buildings and situations, unfortunately, that's always going to be the way. But I think we all have a responsibility whenever we open our businesses, to keep ourselves, each other, and our guests safe. And that's the most important thing, along with trying to make sure that we're also all here next year, because we're not going to make any money this summer. It's pretty unlikely we'll make any this winter. So we've got to put that in the context of all hopefully being here next year as well.
I think what we have to remember as well is as a sector, as the leisure sector, if people come to us, it's because they want to. They're not forced to, they don't have to. So any procedures we put in place, it's for the safety of our staff and our guests. But customers are not forced to visit us or stay in our hotels, visit our attractions. They're taking that decision. So they will be the type of customers who have weighed up the risks and have decided to do it. We're not public transport, we're not a shopping centre, it's not a necessity, they've chosen to come to us.
Yeah, I think...
A question, oh, sorry Dan, a question here in regards to leaflets, which actually I'd be interested to hear as well. Will you be having leaflets in your hotels, such as visitor attraction leaflets? Will you be having magazines in your hotels? What's your stance on that? Because I think a lot of attractions, we all put our leaflets in hotels. Do we need to reprint leaflets, or are you not going to stock them anyway?
Well, one of the things we're doing around guest information is moving everything, not the leaflet racks provided by AHA and NPD and those kind of stuff. I'm not going to touch on that because that's a whole separate thing. But in terms of guest information, we are putting a very, very high amount of guest information online for people to access on their own devices, rather than having to, so that the device that they're comfortable with, that they've been using and no one else uses. That will also include information for when they're on site. So making those bookable areas bookable, all right down to the point of actually ordering your meal, your drink, your room service online, paying for it online, and doing all that as well. So we're moving towards a whole different way of people being able to enjoy the facilities online and enjoy the services that we have, but in a wholly different way. And that does lead on to the point by Sarah about reassessing your business and your product offered. Absolutely, everybody should be, where you can, completely looking at how you can almost reinvent yourself to be safe and to be something that people are going to want to buy, because we have no idea what demand's going to do yet when we come out of this. Some people that I talked to were saying, I was talking to somebody, 2 people this morning, so we're going to be absolutely inundated. You know, there'll be way more demand than supply in the area. Other people I've spoken to, and I've read some research that kind of backs it up, that say it's going to be very, very slow to take off again, with people still nervous about going away. An example I've used is that a local school I was talking to have 1/3 of the children back at school. So if 2/3 of the parents don't trust a teacher to look after their kids, are they going to trust a housekeeper they've never met in their lives to keep them safe with their housekeeping? Not so sure.
There's Dennis has asked a question. I think we touched upon this at the beginning, but we can cover it again. Is there still a discussion that the 2 metre rule could be changed to 1.5 or even 1 metre? Well, that's something us as a business, we'd love it to be reduced to 1 metre, because then we would be able to double the capacity of what we can at the moment on the vessels. But the latest guidance that I think we received it today, that said government had no intention of reducing it to 1 metre. Now, Tim Farron is lobbying hard on our behalf to get that reduced when it's safe to do so. He thought that it was likely that it would, but was it today, Dan, that it came out that government had said not. So what we're doing now is we're putting in place our 2 metre signage. We didn't want to go ahead and print anything or start putting markers on the floor if things were going to get changed to 1 metre, because it's a cost that us as a business don't need at this time. But I think now we are actually just going to go ahead and get our 2 metre signage bought and in place.
I'll just jump. There's a couple of questions about should foggers be compulsory, and about cleaning and soft furnishings and so on. If I was the manufacturer of foggers, I would say yes, they definitely should be compulsory. But my understanding, we were very lucky that we bought 2 of them quite early on. But availability is a big problem. So even if they were, if you haven't got one, you'd probably struggle to get hold of one. So whether they should be compulsory or not, I don't know. And I think the science around them is yet to be confirmed, because it very much depends on what chemicals you put in there. And of course, the next question to do with soft furnishings, have the best guidance you can have for cleaning of soft furnishings generally comes from either the manufacturer of the soft furnishings or the manufacturer of the chemicals. And there's a couple of links we can send out afterwards. There's a couple of companies who, whilst of course they're always desperate to sell you their products, also do have some really, really good guidance and advice on good cleaning. I know Ecolab is one that has some really good guidance, and for those that want it, we can certainly share that out afterwards, because they've got some really good information, which is also usable for the general public should you follow their information as well. So we can certainly share that afterwards.
There's a question here, Dan, about coffee making facilities in rooms, and also single-use salts, peppers and sugars. So should hoteliers or B&B owners remove the coffee making facilities in the room, or should they adapt them? What are you doing at Langdale?
I think, well, we're offering people both. So we're offering choice where you can have your coffee in a disposable container, obviously a biodegradable disposable container, or you can make your own. It depends on people, what people want. I would probably be, personally, I'd probably be uncomfortable using the tea and coffee making facilities in a room, but I would quite happily buy a takeaway. The thing is, I'll be buying a takeaway that someone's just carried to my room. So it's quite a difficult one to get right. And it's about giving people choice. The more choice you give people, the more likely they are to do it or buy it. And that's where talking to your guests is really key. Maybe before they arrive, ask them what their expectations are, ask them what they would like or feel comfortable with, and then you can deliver what they want. And I appreciate it involves increased cost, increased manpower, but that's what adds value to your offering as well. Somebody talked about giving discounts. If you're adding a whole load of value to people's experience in terms of choice and safety, then there's no reason why you should need to discount it.
Are you doing daily room servicing for guests, or just a pre-arrival clean and then after departure?
We haven't decided yet.
Right.
So in terms of the hotel, we haven't worked that out exactly yet. Our head housekeeper is still furloughed, and she'll have the final say on that as soon as she's back in the business. What are foggers? I had thought about that earlier. Foggers are a machine which basically pumps chemicals around a room or a space, and the chemicals are meant to kill everything in sight. So they're supposed to help with additional housekeeping.
Can you send the Ecolab info out after this? Yeah, Johnny.
I'm sure Johnny will do that. We can share that out. Yeah.
I've got a question here. Activity providers, while we may be able to open, the 2-metre social distancing means that on safety reasons we cannot offer activities, gill scrambling, canoeing, rock climbing, etc. Will there be any additional support for businesses that could open but can't if they keep within the regulations?
One for you. You've got the outdoor spaces. I don't know. It's a challenge, and it's a great example of how many unknowns there are still out there. We're all trying to operate in a world that we've never ever experienced in our lives before, in terms of our businesses, and also with no guidance still at the moment. I know that the scientific advice is that outdoors is the safest place to be. So it's much safer outdoors than it is inside at the moment. But you know, if you're taking people or you're delivering outdoor experiences, I suppose it's up to you to reassure that your customers that you're doing it in a safe way, in a way that they're happy with. To win the customers in the first place, but also to keep them happy and make them feel safe. But this is one that kind of could apply to both of us, Jen. Is would you offer a refund for somebody if they couldn't complete their stay, if they had to leave because they were self-isolating? Refunds, and as we all know, because we all had to go through this when we all closed down, and then we eventually got the guidance from the CMA, and I don't know if anybody's here from, I think it was Sally's that got a little bit of a caning from one of their guests that got quite revved up and started a bit of a campaign. It's an absolute minefield. You try and enforce your T's and C's, and you can get absolutely hammered for it. So it's about being pragmatic. We all, like I said, we all need to be here next year, so we can't go giving with your guests and delivering amazing experiences and fantastic customer service. The balance is where you need to be. Where exactly that balance is, I don't know. Jen, refunds?
Refunds, we would. If a customer couldn't come to us because of that, we would refund them. But ours is a couple of £100, like a room is. However, we have refunded charters that haven't been able to go ahead. We've refunded weddings. We've moved the majority of weddings because everyone's rebooked. But yeah, for us, it's about brand loyalty and trying to do the best for our customers and maintaining our customer base as best we can, really. That kind of moves on to weddings, because someone says, do you have any insights about preparing for the resumption of weddings in hotels and other authorised venues? Should we expect this to be established in line with other meeting people guidelines, i.e. no more than X amount of people within social distance? Well, that's something that we really are lobbying for guidance on, because we do a lot of wedding charters. We do a lot of events, lots of celebrations on board. We can't do any of this at the minute, so it's something that we're really, really pushing for. In terms of weddings, Dan, do you have any hotel insight on that?
Just in terms of the actual operation, I've spoken to a number of wedding venues over the last week, and they still haven't got any definitive guidance from the local registrars about when they can resume and what events they can resume with. If you are a wedding venue, it's the registrar that is key to the resumption of weddings, and in terms of how they can take place with the distancing. Again, it's one of those unknowns. The beauty of weddings is, unlike other events, particularly corporate events and other stuff, is that there's a very, very good chance if they've cancelled once, they're probably going to happen again, unless they've spent too much time together and fallen out while they've been on lockdown, which is a possibility. And so it is pretty likely that they will happen again. And it's about looking after those, getting them to rebook, whilst also taking new business as well, because you want to be able to take new business while still moving that business forward. And it's a really difficult balance to get. But certainly if I was a wedding venue, it's the registrars I would be pushing for at this stage, because they will have the most up-to-date information about what they can do and when they can do it. And they will find out long before the rest of us in terms of what's going on.
I spoke to a bride, I think it was yesterday, who was changing a wedding, who says she hasn't been able to get hold of a registrar at all. So whether they're closed at the moment, who knows?
Yeah.
Would guests be covered by their holiday insurance if they fell ill? Well, it depends what insurance companies do now in terms of adding COVID-19 into their policies. I've no idea. That's a completely different sector.
So I've dealt with a lot of self-catering bookings, but particularly timeshare bookings or timeshare owners where their booking is a recurring booking and it's not really a holiday product. Some are covered and some aren't. It very much depends on the wording of your policy. But I would think it will be the same. You know, it's a bit like our business insurance. Lots of us are pushing and trying to make a business interruption claim. Some of us are covered, some aren't, depending on the wording of the policy, and it will be the same. I think it's worth putting in your T's and C's and on your website to that it's more important than ever that people take out holiday insurance for any, whether it's just a hotel stay or a week-long self-catering stay or an event, wedding, whatever. It's more important than ever to make sure that you're covered. I suspect if you wanted to add COVID to your cover and you're not covered, it will probably cost more than your holiday, I suspect, at the moment.
That kind of leads on to a question that Sandy asked earlier, and it's one that worries me as well. Are there any liability issues with regards to somebody possibly catching COVID-19 and it being proved that they caught it from your premises or attraction? I think that's something that all of us, in terms of PR and again brand, we don't want that to happen. We don't want to be named as that attraction or hotel where somebody caught COVID. Would we be liable at that point? I have no idea. I think what we have to do is put in place our risk assessments and just give the customer as much information as possible. I've actually seen two really good examples, and I'll ask Johnny to circulate them at the end of this, of how overseas attractions have done it. And if you look at Disney's, it basically is about 3 lines that says, if you catch COVID at any of our properties, it's your own fault. And they're just not taking any liabilities. And there was another one, it was a gator farm in the US that opened, and they've done a whole video about their safety messaging, and it's a lot, it's either extreme, but it's just, I'll send them around because it's 2 really good examples of how people are approaching it. But the Disney one surprised me.
And I think that probably answers the question from Susan. And children's play areas are probably a little bit more akin to visitor attractions, about will they be able to open. For me, we have a children's play area, a small one here at Langdale, and we're not planning on separating it off or closing it particularly, but it will be at people's own choice whether they choose to go and use that kind of thing.
I think we can't, no one of us can think of every little bit of how we can make our business secure or safe or ready to open. I think what you need to do, and what we've done, is actually walk through your business as a customer would and look at all your touch points. There was one bit that we've only just noted as an area, which is the hand dryers. So hand dryers, you put your hands under a hand dryer, that sprays water everywhere. So we had a look at this, and that they are seen as a high risk area of the spread of COVID. So we've replaced all hand dryers now with paper towels.
I think that's really important to walk your business. I caught our pub landlady and our hotel manager walking around the pub with a 2-meter long stick. They each had a 2-meter long stick in their hands. I thought they were like doing some kind of Star Wars reenaction to start with, but no, it turns out they're actually walking around to make sure as you walk around you're not 2 meters near the next nearest person or table. And how do they manage that? We have a ladies and gents toilets in our pub where the corridor is at 1 meter. So how do we get people to come and go between those? How do we queue? How do we organize queuing? Exactly like Jen said before, that's the hardest part of our pub to get right. We can do table service, we can do order and collect for food and drinks and all that kind of stuff, but as soon as we've sold somebody the requisite amount of beer to make us a bit of money, they're going to need to go to the toilet, and then that's what causes us the problem. But Leslie's made a really good point. I know at number 43 they do have some space, which is great. Serving breakfast outside is perceived as added value, and I'm sure Leslie probably can't push the rate she charges up any higher, but if she could, I'm sure that would be something she'd charge even more for. Well done, Leslie. But anything like that where you can look at those options to keep people safe in any format is always really helpful.
Someone said, are you planning servers wearing masks? And this is something that as yet we don't know what we should do on this. Should our staff have face coverings on? Should they not? We've ordered some with logos. I think our consumers initially will expect our staff to be wearing them. But that's, I have no idea. I think we'll go and start with our staff wearing them at all times and see how customers react. I think a lot of what we're going to do when we do open, it'll just be reacting to consumer behaviour.
Jen's absolutely right, and for exactly that reason, we're right in the middle of doing a survey with a number of our past guests, and at the moment, one of the questions about staff wearing PPE and specifically masks, would it put our customers off? And the vast majority, huge number, has said they'd be quite happy with that. Even a significant number of past guests have even stated that they would be quite happy if they were required to wear it in bars and restaurants as well. Neither of which we've confirmed, but like Jen, yes, it is going to be that way. But it's good to know that people are already comfortable with that expectation for when they come here.
Sue's just gone back to your point, Dan, of the pinch points at the toilets and how do you overcome that. The way that we've overcome that is by adding it to our booking procedures, saying that at some point, if a customer does go to the toilet, you will be less than 2 meters next to somebody else. And I think all you can do is give the customer the information, tell them that where 2 meter distancing can't be adhered to, it's their choice to then come to this property, go to that attraction, buy the ticket. I think you just have to put it in the customer's hands.
And Jen, are you training your staff to police that and to deal specifically with any issues that might come around, or are you going to let give the customers all of the information then kind of let them police themselves?
It's just give the customers all the information and let them police themselves. As I said, it'll be in our terms and conditions, which a customer has to tick to read to say they've read them before they book a ticket. But our skippers will do a safety announcement on board. It's all about communications, and we can only do so much. We aren't there to police if people adhere to the guidelines or not.
I think that's very much the line that we're taking as well. We're going to do everything we possibly can to make sure everybody's safe in terms of guests, staff, and local communities as well, which is always very important. But at the end of the day, the people making the bookings and the people mainly consuming the bookings are adults, and we would hope that they would adhere to the T's and C's. There's a question here about employee health checks, temperature checks on arrival at work. Are you planning to do that, Jen? Are you planning to do any additional testing with your staff?
We've ordered some thermometers at the minute. So yes, initially we are. Again, we're going to put that out in our messaging, because I think your safety messaging is now going to turn into your marketing messaging. The more that we can tell customers that we're doing to protect our staff and our customers, I think the better. And I think temperature checks is one of them.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think that staff would be very comfortable. I'd be very happy doing that. Not only would I not want to cause a problem for the rest of my colleagues, but also I would want to go to work knowing that it's a safe place to go to work, and I'm not going to catch it off another colleague, which I think is important.
I think it's clear to say anything that we're doing, it's not in any way, shape or form the rules, and it's not black and white. It's each business is interpreted in the guidance differently, if I can get my words out, and it's up to each individual business as to what they do. All we're doing here today is sharing what we're doing and best practice, and going forward I think that's what we need to do more. Just speak to other businesses, see what other businesses are doing in the area.
Yeah, there was a question, I can't find it now, but there it is, from a question about delivering food, place a plate of food on a table while maintaining distancing. That all depends on the regulations. I think that's one of the areas where I would expect there to be some kind of advice on that. We haven't put a specific plan in place at any of our food and drink outlets yet, in terms of table service or in terms of a collection point or whatever it happens to be. But don't forget, when somebody takes a plate of food to a table, not only is the server touching that plate of food, you will have had at least one chef touching the plate of food before it gets there as well. So that is an area that could be of concern for some people, but I think that is an area where we definitely need to see some guidelines.
Will you have your servers in gloves, Dan? Because again, it's that perceived message, isn't it? Would a customer feel more at ease having their plate delivered by somebody wearing gloves than somebody not wearing gloves? That person will have touched the same amount of things, glove on or glove off, but it's just that perception?
Yeah, that's something where we're waiting for the guidelines. If you did that, you would have to have a fresh set of gloves every single time you put something down, which is fine. But that's something where we're going to wait for the guide. It is something we're considering, and we've also done a survey amongst our staff to ask them what they would be comfortable with or what they would like to see. And certainly additional PPE is something that they would like to see and they're happy with. So that's something we're definitely considering. What about PPE for your staff? Because obviously there's potential for all sorts of interaction with guests and proximity to guests on a visitor attraction like a boat or in the museum.
Well, what we're going to do is, we'll have our staff with the face coverings. We are just now putting perspex screens up at all the receptions or shops. We are putting perspex up on our vessels, so the skipper will be behind a perspex screen. The crew, which would usually walk up and down the boat, will just do what he has to do, sort of untie the boat when they set off, and then he will go and stand in the bar, which will then be closed to keep him away from guests. So we're doing, again, everything we can in terms of protecting our guests. A few of our vessels, the skippers are upstairs or in sealed areas anyway. And in terms of purchasing tickets, it'll all be done online. There will be one person in the ticket office that will be scanning people's electronic boarding passes when they come on board.
You may have mentioned this at the beginning, Jen, but in terms of your F&B operations, are any of them opening along with your sailings when you plan to open?
On board we're not, no, and we took the decision just yesterday actually to cancel our summer evening buffet cruises for the rest of the year. We just looked at how we could serve our guests, how the band could be on board, how people could move around, and we found that there's no way customers would have the experience that they paid for if we ran them. So we've taken the decision to cancel them and refund. Initially, we're not opening any of our shops or drinks on board. We will then see if there's any further guidance. We just don't know how somebody could order a drink from a bar 2 meters away. We just know.
Which also takes us on, there's a question there about how would you handle cutlery and glassware? That's a real challenge. An option is to make it all disposable. That has sustainability, environmental and cost challenges attached to it. A glass coming out of a glass washer is probably about one of the cleanest things on earth, because those things are at such a high temperature and so on. It's what happens to it between then and landing in front of somebody with a nice refreshing beverage in it. That's a challenge, and we won't know how to deal with it or what our customer expectations are until we reopen. None of us have opened apart from a few takeaways as yet, so we really don't know what our customers are going to be prepared to pay for or can expect. So it's a huge learning experience for everybody when we open. And there was a question there, Jen, which might be one for you, from Peter and Iona. If somebody does arrive, if you have somebody does arrive with a high temperature, can you deny them access? Something we haven't thought of.
I would say yes, because why else would you be temperature checking? If somebody does have a high temperature, then yes, I think you're well within your rights to, following the guidance. How that customer reacts to that and what they do afterwards, who knows? But I would say
that's why you wear a mask.
Why temperature check them?
It's one of the benefits of wearing a mask.
There's a question here. Does CT or either of us have any insights regarding risk assessments? Have we seen any good templates or industry standards? I've got our risk assessments here, and they are pages and pages long, and that's just because our managers have been working on them behind the scenes tirelessly. I don't know if I've not seen any templates, but I'm sure there are some out there, and it's something that we can look into. And if there are, send them round with a follow up to this.
Yeah, we can get them added to the info@cumbriatourism.org website, onto the coronavirus portal there for help with that.
For anybody that's a museum or an attraction online, tomorrow at 4:30, there's an inside look at reopening strategies of museums and attractions worldwide. And on that call will be people from all over the country saying how they have opened and what issues they've had opening. So I think that'll be a really good one for us if you do want to watch that. I've signed up to watch it anyway. I'll send the link round for anybody else, but I'll also then get the recording of it afterwards and send that and put that on the same hub. I think the best way that any of us can take advice from others and see how others have done it rightly or wrongly.
Just thanks, Jen. Just going back to risk assessments, my old colleague, Mr. Lancaster, has suggested the NCAS for some food and food-related risk assessments, and we'll get a link to that on the Cumbria Tourism website. Thanks, Nick.
Will you be undertaking maintenance of your air conditioning and ventilation systems to ensure this is sanitised before service and provide assurance that all air recirculating functions are disabled?
There will be, for us, there'll be quite a big amount of maintenance and recommissioning around exactly those kind of areas, because there is the risk of Legionella, which if anybody has a long enough memory to remember the very sad events around, I think it's called Forum 28 in Barrow, there was a very sad, some very sad deaths around there due to Legionella. So even the basics, things like shower heads, it's not just air conditioning, things like shower heads that have been stood empty, potentially with water in for some time, need to undergo some extremely rigorous testing and cleaning before opening. It's very, very important that all those areas are looked at. I'm sure we can find some guidelines, certainly on if you clean in a way which will eliminate Legionella, you've probably killed just about everything else as well. And I'm sure we'll get some guidelines that we can put on the website for that as well.
Just in a message there from Claire about the meeting being cancelled. Yes, it has, but it's been cancelled because we've got the international one at 4:30 instead. So yeah, sign up to that one, Claire. How are you handling cancellations in the scenario that English Parliament allows travel but Scottish Wealth doesn't?
You handle more cancellations than me, I think, just recently. Is it? Certainly here, we haven't had that as a problem because we're just cancelling everything. So there was quite a drama around cancellations when all this first happened, and I know there was we've mentioned them earlier. There was a couple of businesses that came under a bit of media flack and flack from certain guests who were making quite a drama about their cancellation policies. And then the CMA stepped in, the Competition and Markets Authority did step in with some guidance. Now, of course, the CMA guidance is guidance, and it's there to be challenged by individuals through trading standards or through lawyers or whatever. But it is best to stick to the CMA guidance. The CMA guidance did pretty much say that T's and C's are now null and void, and you've got to do the right thing. The right thing includes giving a refund if and where it's possible and appropriate, and so on. So it has made things very difficult for operators. Things like this will always be in favour of the consumer. That's just life, and that's the way it is. And we always treat these things differently. I know I certainly do, is that when I'm a consumer and I want a refund, you know, I'll be pretty keen to push for it. But when I don't want to give a refund, or when I want someone to move their booking, I'm pretty keen to push for that as well. And it depends on which side of the fence you are at any time. But also, if we give too many refunds back, some of us won't be here next year. So we've got to consider that as well. So the whole refund thing is a challenge. And if we get a second wave and either a localized or a national lockdown at a time when none of us really can afford to give refunds, bear in mind the CMA have already given their guidance, then it's going to be a huge challenge for a lot of businesses, and something that if it happens, and let's hope it doesn't, that it's going to be really difficult to deal with.
Looking forward, Dan, rather than refunds, looking forward at bookings, how have yours been? What's the trend? What are we seeing? When do we expect people to be staying in hotels again if we can open on the 4th of July?
It's a really, really mixed picture. We have quite a long lead-in time here, so we've got a reasonable amount of business that's been on the book since before we closed. Looking at July, August, and September, we're looking at reduced occupancy, so we don't need to sell as much. So that's kind of a bit reassuring. But we've also got significantly increased costs. So I need to be able to convince my guests that they can have less facilities or different facilities that they need to book, maybe not have the time they want, but pay a little bit more for. And that's difficult. So the premium is on really good housekeeping, looking after people, keeping them safe. But I know it's a very mixed picture. Jen, when we've been on the Lake District Hoteliers Association meetings, and I think you've been to more than me, that it's a really mixed bag from people there, isn't it?
Yeah. Some are seeing inquiries for July, others are saying September. I think we had Matt Hartnett from Heart of the Lakes on one of the calls, and he's saying he's seen a huge spike in self-catering inquiries, which I think as an industry we expect customers to maybe book self-catering first.
And there's another one about cancellations from Sally. Have you cancelled all bookings up to the 4th? I think you have, haven't you? I think.
Yes, yeah, we've cancelled everything, and obviously all of our international and all of our group business has cancelled right up until the end of the year.
And you've notified, yeah, we've done the same and notified everyone to that effect. You've just already kind of answered Liz's messages that Liz's message that you're getting cancellations outside of the current lockdown period as well.
Yeah, and that's majority, not just day visitors, that's group business. So groups that would have been flying into the area or being transported here on a coach. I've been speaking to a lot of coach operators, I've been speaking to a lot of international operators. At the moment, coaches can only carry about 11 people if the 2-metre social distancing guidelines were in place. So all of our domestic group has pretty much cancelled to the end of the year. All of our international has definitely cancelled to the end of the year.
And are you starting to see an upturn in bookings? I know people don't know what they can book yet, and you've seen quite a bit of demand from possibly people who are here already and hadn't really watched the news for the last 3 months. But are you seeing an upturn in bookings now for people going forward?
Yes, we're seeing a lot for the end of the year. A lot of weddings have moved to the end of the year or next year. I don't know if a lot of people that were thinking about getting married in 2021 have now decided to, because we've had a huge amount of inquiries for next year. In terms of day visitors and people to the museum, the phones were crazy this weekend with people asking if we were open, what time our next boat went, if they could hire a self-drive. Again, we feel that the self-drive area of our business is what will open first because that's the easiest to do with social distancing. We can definitely see that customers want to travel. I don't think we're going to worry about demand in terms of day visitors. I think if we have nice weather, they'll be there. In terms of the museum, I don't know what's going to happen with the museum. It's an indoor attraction. The data I've had has said that when customers have answered, 2/3 of people say they'll wait a bit before going to a museum or attraction, which isn't great news, but who knows? Consumers' confidence has changed rapidly over the weekend, hasn't it?
Definitely, yeah. Dominic from Waternook is saying that he's seen a 200% increase in inquiries. We at Langdale, we've seen a significant increase in web traffic. We've seen from April to May, we've seen about an 80% increase in web traffic, but then it did go down to virtually nothing. So, and also we've seen a significant increase in bookings, but then again, we're one booking ahead of no bookings is 100% increase. So it is an increase and we're seeing a lot more interest, but it is from a very, very low base where we did have a number of weeks where we were just pretty much doing nothing at all. Overall for the winter, Jen, what's your kind of feeling for this winter? What for the lakes generally, or for Cumbria, I should say?
I wish I knew. I hope that we'll be busy. I hope that anybody that's not been able to travel around over the summer will want to come to the lakes in the winter. But it's generally, for most businesses in the area, it's our quietest time. This is our busiest time and we're not able to operate. I think marketing-wise, what Cumbria Tourism will do, and us as businesses will feed into, is really push at that winter campaign. Get the pictures of wide open spaces, autumn winter shots with blue sky. we push it quite a lot. The pictures of the snow on the fells, blue sky, and a boat going down the middle of the lake. I think it will all be about messaging and what marketing campaigns are in place. And I know, having worked on it with the team, CT's marketing plan going forward is fantastic, but we need businesses to feed into that as well.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think we're in a situation of unknowns, which for those of us old enough that remember foot and mouth, we thought it might be a little bit like that when this first started happening, but it turns out to be very, very different, and in many, many ways a lot worse. See, that was particularly horrible for the agricultural industry at the time. I think that if we have a second wave and another lockdown, or even a local one, I think that would push a lot of businesses over the edge, which would be really, really sad, because there will be some that may not be financially viable if that was to happen, and that would be particularly sad. So a really strong campaign and some fantastic short-term quarantine to stop us all going on our holidays abroad would be really, really helpful.
I think what I've had as well is a lot of accommodation providers ringing round to see what attractions are going to open and when, because I know a lot of accommodation providers the guests will want to do something when they're here. So any time we can share that information with each other, you know, I'm happy to tell anybody our plans at any time. It's about, I think, more than ever now, the collaborative working, sharing messages, sharing best practice.
Yeah, and making the most of the new itinerary function on the Cumbria Tourism website, where we can help people to plan ahead and get booked ahead, I think is quite important. Charles from Eden District Council Tourism has put quite an interesting point about certain markets might disappear. Well, they have already. The coach market has pretty much disappeared, certainly domestic-wise with Shearings, Urquhart and a number of others. Clearly, getting 40 vulnerable people on a bus and then driving them around to a whole load of potential COVID touch points is not really a great business model for anybody going forward for the foreseeable future. So it's happening already. International, Jen's the font of all knowledge on international stuff. I'm hearing that 2024, before it gets anywhere near similar sort of levels to what we've had before. So the market's changing already, and we need to change our product and our offering and particularly our marketing to reflect that and look for new audiences.
And I think every DMO and every county in the UK will be looking to do that, and it's about how do we stand out against everyone else. What I found interesting this weekend, having the phones, is the amount of enquiries I got from Liverpool, just because of from the accent, but they would be people that would usually go to Wales for a day trip. So it was just really interesting talking to these people. So it's new markets and places like that, I think, as well.
I think a whole campaign around "We're better than Wales" is possibly something that the team should get right onto. A couple more questions. We're going to run out of time fairly soon. Specific cleaning products. I don't think it's really up to us to recommend specific cleaning products, but we're very happy to point people in the direction of companies. I mean, I mentioned Ecolab, but there are others, and we can put a list of companies on the Cumbria Tourism website for you that you can talk to. Because the science is still relatively new, my understanding, and housekeeping is not one of my areas of expertise in terms of my work, bleach is the most effective cleaning product for dealing with COVID. I'm not suggesting that you go and spray bleach all over your hotel rooms, but I think we're still waiting to see exactly what the best guidance is, and we can certainly point people in the right direction.
In terms of what we're doing, and we'll be cleaning buoyancy aids, we'll be cleaning door handles, barriers. We're just using the varicidal spray, which has been 99.9% against COVID, apparently.
And there's a question about do we think that one-night stays will be more attractive? There might be. We've seen some accommodation providers already incentivizing longer stays because there isn't the housekeeping requirement between stays. And the more you can reduce your housekeeping requirement, obviously it's more profitable if you're not discounting too much. And it's a bit safer because there's fewer people moving around within those areas where you've got tight touch points. But I think it very much depends on your business model. And this is where it's a great opportunity for accommodation providers and everyone else to analyse the business that they used to have and look at things like your average stay. How many of us know exactly what our average length of stay is at various different times of year? And if you can increase your average length of stay, that's great. But you maybe don't want to give it away either, because a shorter length of stay might be just what your customers are after, and then you might see a decrease if you don't give your customers what they want. So it is a difficult one, and that's one that I think we've spoken about a few times about analyze your own business and do what's right for your business. And if you've got a good property management system, the information should all be there for you to get out to do some analysis. And of course, you've got till the 4th of July to do it as well.
Claire's asked, is the one place that we can put all this information as to who's open and when? Well, I think that can be on the CT website. Don't want to give Johnny any more work, but
I've already given him loads. Mark again has pointed out that the Welsh Government is advising against holidaying until September the 26th. So a marketing campaign in Liverpool should be maybe we should be looking at. Also, interestingly, today the Italian government have announced that they're looking at paying Italian people €500 to holiday in Italy. Maybe if there was any money anywhere, that would be something great that could happen.
I know that Japan are doing that internally, paying 50% of flights for Japanese to visit other areas of Japan.
But of course, then you've got to get on a plane with a whole load of other potential COVID suspects as well if you do that. Yeah. So always a challenge, always a challenge. Just going back, Jen, before we wrap up, let's just make the most of your experience and knowledge in the international market. For those that are either already involved or are thinking of getting involved, where do you see this going over the next year to 5 years? And what are the implications for us here in Cumbria?
I think in terms of 2020, we'll have little or none in terms of international business. Any international we do have will definitely be FITs or people travelling alone or in family groups. Going forward, the reports I'm getting are positive. I think the worst one I had was from Japan, but Japanese are very cautious travellers anyway, and they deem Italy and the UK as unsafe. Because of the number of cases, but Japan has always been a very cautious international market. Chinese, we've got our own Chinese social media platform, and we have seen a huge increase in engagement during this time. So we know that younger Chinese are wanting to travel. We've had inquiries already. So I think international wise, when people can travel, they will, but not in the mass amounts that we've seen before in terms of group business. I think the group business will have to restart from the beginning again. India, tour operators have been sending me a huge amount of information in terms of India, but again, Indians travel in family groups anyway, so we're hoping that that'll be a big market for us next year. And the US, we've just seen a huge amount of inquiries about tours booking in for next year. So we think that the US will be a market as well.
That's quite interesting. I think it is going to be a challenge. We are heading to, on the slightly negative side, we are heading towards being the kind of the basket case of Europe in terms of our number of COVID cases. So it is going to be a challenge to market that ahead of other places like Germany that have only had 8,000 cases. Whatever the rights and wrongs of that are, it is a fact that is going to make it more challenging for us going forward. And we need to, for a country that's always in the past has been seen as a relatively safe place for international visitors. Just a really interesting question which we haven't touched on, and it's a really good one to bring in at this stage, is the relationship between the visitor economy and local communities, which we've had a question about, particularly around some of the social media, around some of the behaviour, some of the littering and the car parking, particularly this weekend. I think my view is that over the COVID experience so far, the relationship between CT particularly and the visitor economy, local communities and other significant stakeholders like the police and so on has improved. It's very, very important that we as an industry are responsible and careful in our opening. It's also important that other people do appreciate the big supply chain that's out there that we service and we provide for, not just in terms of supplying specific products to the hospitality industry, but also the much wider supply chain. I'm sure all our businesses have had a plumber and a joiner and an electrician and other services that are not specific to our industry, but are enjoy the benefits of our industry along with many others. So I think it's important that we act responsibly, work with local communities and continue to support that supply chain, although clearly none of us are going to have any money to spend at all for at least the next 15 months as we go into this winter. So we all need to work together to make the Lake District a very, very welcoming place and somewhere where hopefully we're all still here next year.
Yeah, I do think when our reopening, our ideas are reopening will be initially local people or people within an hour's drive time that will come to us as we start to open, and then it will widen out from there.
Lake District, Carlisle Lake District Airport, how's it faring? My understanding is that it's only just open for recreational flights, as in if you own your own aeroplane. And apparently there are no opening dates for the airport as yet, although Logan Air have started flying to other destinations in the UK. Jen can put me right on this, but when the airport did open, and this is no disservice to Lake District Carlisle Airport, when it did open, I'm not aware that we saw a difference in international visitor numbers anyway. Is that right?
Yeah, in terms of overseas and far away international, no. It did service the Irish market. They have 3 routes: Belfast, Dublin and Southend, and I think Belfast was the most popular, then followed by Dublin, and Southend was the one that didn't really take off, if you excuse the pun.
Okay, we're just about hit our time limit now. We've been going for an hour and a half, and I think that's our time limit. So thank you very, very much, everybody, for coming. We will, Sue has already posted in the comments that website at cumbriatourism.org is the place for visitor attractions to advise of their opening and their plans for opening. And we can get that information onto the website for you all, and I'm sure CT will be sharing that through one of their member newsletters. But thank you all very much for coming. Jen?
Yeah, just to say, Sue will also, or Johnny will send around our contact details. So if you have anything that we haven't covered, we're happy to answer any questions. Again, happy to share best practice with anybody.
Stay safe, everyone, and hope opening works out really well for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.